Okay. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Kinaway TV. I'd like to start off today's episode by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in which we're all meeting and paying respects to elders past, present, and emerging. So today we have Chantel Thompson presenting again. This is episode 3, with last week's webinar touching on grit and grace, and also with today's webinar, about courage, confidence, and purpose. And I think it'll provide a bit more of ways how we can apply these things practically to our personal and business moving forward. So I'll keep it short and sweet, this one. So for everyone that's tuning in, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, click on the bell for notifications, and also feel free to comment throughout today's webinar, which Chantel will be addressing towards the end of today's webinar. So I'd like to welcome Chantel into the webinar, and I'll let Chantel take it from here.
Hi everyone, welcome to the third and final episode series workshop of the Awakening the Warrior Within. And I would just like to take a moment to stop and express how grateful I am and how much I've learnt through this experience, and acknowledge country at this point in time. I'm home on country. I'm on Latchi Latchi country, and Barkindji country is our neighbour. And I'd like to pay my respects to elders, both past, present, and emerging. I would like to pay my respects to Kinaway and everyone that's kind of made this possible for me. And I'd like to acknowledge my background. The last 2 sessions that we've done would have been done with a different background, because that was when I was in Melbourne in my home, and I have a little bit more of a corner set up where I can look a bit more professional. But right now I'm in one of the back rooms at our house that we're staying at in Mildura, and I wanted to keep it real. I didn't want to put up a virtual backdrop, because this is the reality of the times that we're in right now, in terms of people are making do with what they have. People are showing up as best as they can. And for me, that's what this series was about. It was very much about trying to share my knowledge and skills with you about how to show up, how I found the warrior within, and how that has kind of led me to be able to become the woman that I am, but that is going to lead me out of the season that we're in. I don't know what's ahead, but I know that from past history and using the things that I have spoken about over the last 2 workshops and what we're going to speak about today has very much been a key determining factor in me being able to share this knowledge with you today, and still having hope and determination and grit and that warrior spirit to be able to move forward. And today, the first episode was about awakening the warrior within and what that means to be, lead, and serve from the heart. The second one was about grit and grace, and how we can use grit to be able to show up, and how that can help us move from surviving to thriving. And today we're going to be talking about courage, confidence, and purpose. And if anyone has any comments or any questions, particularly if you attended the first 2 sessions, please put them in the chat box. The guys will take care of you and really bring that up, because I'd really love to be able to unpack any questions that you have at this point in time around how can you use these things to show up, particularly when the world is in so much chaos and we're still very much in the thick of things. I left Melbourne to come back home to country because what was happening in Melbourne was making me nervous. And I very much wanted to make sure that if we did get locked down again, I was back home with my family. And at the same time, there's this balance of everything that's happening that's completely out of my control, but also this opportunity to see what are the options right now. What can we do? Because often out of chaos, or when the world gets shaken up, that's when people that are capable of taking advantage of the current situation. We really see new companies rise. We really see new people come to the forefront. And that's kind of where I wanted to start, is by unpacking, like, where are we now? And we know what our biggest challenges are. Right now, COVID is still very much an issue. Do we open up our borders? Do we keep our borders closed? When JobKeeper stops in September, we're going to see the real state of the economy, because a lot of businesses have been propped up by JobKeeper. And when they reduce job seekers back to what it was before COVID happened, we're going to see a lot of people lose their ability to have equal footing. But there are also some really big opportunities at this point in time. For myself, it was about taking that time to sit with myself and go, right, where am I at now? Where is my business at? Because my normal speaking gigs, going into schools, the opportunities just aren't there right now. So what are the opportunities? And I hadn't really done a lot of webinars or online sessions or content or creating online courses and workshops. So for me, it was a matter of going, well, who can I reach out to and who can I trial this with and partner with? And Kinaway was the first organization that I really came to. Now I'm speaking at another workshop next week, which is around how can people in marketing and with businesses really, or marketers really, use their marketing to help and take action in terms of Black Lives Matters and creating real equality and diversity. And this is a statement that I shared and I seen on Instagram, and it was this, I think, sums up a lot of us at this point in time, is just trying to heal my emotional trauma, grow a business that's changing the world, be the best person I can be for the people that I love, forgive the people who have hurt me, eat right, exercise, meditate, grow and work hard to be the first in my family to break generational trauma patterns, but also not just be the first to break those generational trauma patterns, but also take people with me on that journey and be able to use the skills and the knowledge I have to see what thriving looks like for my family and I, and to be able to share that with our young ones and the people that I work with. And my older brother he came from a really difficult start, and he found himself in a really challenging spot about 10 or 12 years ago. And he was given a second chance, and people backed him and believed in him. Now he's running a very successful goat herding business up in New South Wales and across Victoria. And he has also just bought a property of his own. He's the first one in our family to buy a big property, and he's running Lucerne, and he's teaching me a lot about business and around that side of things and creating relationships, particularly when there's no social media involved. It's very much old school relationships. So why courage, confidence, and purpose? Nelson Mandela is one of the people that I look up to that holds a more public face. But we also have our own Nelson Mandela in Australia. Like, we have many of our elders and our ancestors who have been imprisoned, maybe not necessarily incarcerated behind bars. Some have, but some it's been an emotional imprisonment, some it's been a social imprisonment. But what can we learn from them? What can we learn from those that stood strong during the hardest times, and they were able to delve into their courage? They were able to find purpose in their darkness, and that was the thing that allowed them to have confidence that they would be able to come out the other side. For me, sitting in yarning circles and practicing our culture and continuing that, when for 200 years my ancestors couldn't do that, my grandmothers couldn't do that. It's the most rebellious and honoring thing that we can do at a time like this, is that when we choose to do those practices and we honor them and we take the responsibility to continue that culture as best as we can within the knowledge that we have. I haven't been taught these things. I haven't been entrenched in it. Like, I've been very much more in the Western world than I have in our culture, but I've taken what I've needed. And I'm now on this journey to see and soak up and learn as much as I can, because I see the value of that. I see what it does to myself. But sitting in circles with young women and sharing stories over food and unpacking things that are troubling us, that's women's business. That's older women sharing with younger women, but also younger women teaching and sharing with older women as well. And yesterday and the day before, I took 2 days out and I went out on country. The first day was with a sister that we shared, we exchanged. She has different perspectives and she's further ahead on the spiritual journey and the cultural knowledge than I am. I'm further ahead in terms of business and the Western academic skill building knowledge, and we shared and we exchanged. And our kids were there watching us. Our kids were climbing trees. They were in the water, but they were around these conversations of business and pain and what are the opportunities and how do we deal with lateral violence and how do we raise our children to be strong and fierce and how do we stop living in survival mode. And then yesterday I grabbed up all the equipment that I've bought over the last 3 years. I love going down the river, but we didn't really ever have much to go down the river with. So every year at Christmas time, I'd save and I'd save and I'd save from my business. And I would allow myself to go out and buy a Weber, some tents, camping chairs, camping table. I bought life jackets, I bought kayaks, and I even bought this foam rollout mat that the kids could use as a landing pad in the middle of the water. And I was able to take those things down to the river yesterday, and we had 7 young girls with us. The youngest was 8, the oldest was 16, and they're all my nieces. 2 were my daughters, and they were just allowed to run wild. They were allowed to connect with each other. They were climbing trees. They went for walks. The aunties and I were sitting down together sharing our stories and experiences, and then one of the little ones came and sat with me, and I got to teach her weaving, a skill that I'd only learned a couple of months ago. And then a few of them were like, Auntie Chantel, we want to wrestle. We want to see if we can beat you in jiu-jitsu. And that filled my cup up so much that it's overflowing. And that to me is the purpose of what I do. It's whatever I'm choosing to be and what I'm choosing to do with my business and the opportunity that I have in front of me, I can become my own Nelson Mandela and free myself from whatever is imprisoning me at this point in time, to be able to sit there with these young women and share my knowledge, but also be the role model, because they're going to watch what I'm doing just as much as what I say to them in person. And the photo on the far right is our tears become our mess, our pain becomes our message. How can we use what we're experiencing now in our personal, our business lives, our struggles, to be able to move forward? How can we use that? Because yesterday, when we were practicing culture and we were sharing and we were laughing, to me, that's knowledge that we are healing the wounds and the tears of our ancestors. Our laughter becomes their healing. Courage. Now, I've spoken strongly about courage, and it's weaved its way through the themes of what I stand for and a strong value, but it's more than just a value. It's more than just a behavior. It's a way of doing life. It becomes a way of showing up. And again, I bring it back to Brene Brown, because a lot of people think that you're born with courage, or courage is a firefighter diving into a fire to rescue someone, or a mum protecting her child. Those are big moments of courage. But at this point in time, I think the small moments of courage are really, really important as well, in that it's the courage to stop and take a look in the mirror when no one else is watching, and to face yourself and go, am I being the best version of myself? Am I using the knowledge that I have to be able to show up? And am I really operating from my heart and telling the story of who I am with my whole heart? Am I telling that story to myself, and am I sharing that with the world, or am I hiding? Now, courage can be used in little moments or big moments to overcome adversity, overcome fear. It can teach us to bring out our best effort, because I'm all about effort. Some days are easier than others. In that, some days you feel full of energy and you feel like getting out of bed and you feel good. Like I had the most amazing 2 days yesterday, but this morning something has just knocked my body. Like I've just woken up really tired and just got a really big headache. And I think that I just poured so much of myself emotionally into the last 2 days that my body's saying, hey, you need to take a rest. So I got up early, did what I had to do. I prepared the way I need to prepare for these type of sessions when I'm sharing my story or my knowledge. And then I had a 20-minute cat nap, got up, had my water, went outside, connected with the sunshine for 5 minutes. And that for me is small uses of courage to be able to show up, because I had in my head, it's like, oh, I'm going to forget things, or I'm not going to have the best energy going into this. But I was like, I just took a big deep breath and I used everything that I've been speaking about to be able to show up today. And fear, that being able to manage my fear. I don't think that fear is a bad thing. And I know there's a lot of quotes out there saying, be fearless. We're all going to have fear. You're always going to have fears that you're going to fail, or that you're going to let someone down, or that you're not going to be able to show up. But I think for me, it's about being able to manage my fear. And when that starts to play inside my head, is taking a big, deep breath and coming back into my heart. And courage for me is about effort. It's about, am I showing up? Can I just do one thing 1% better today? And then that way, eventually over time and consistency, I'll be able to become my best self, and I'll be able to show up. There's this thing called activation energy. And I saw a TED talk about it, and it made so much sense to me. And what they spoke about in this TED talk, it was 5 seconds of courage. And that when you first get the impulse to do something, if you don't take action within the first 5 seconds and you give yourself too much time to think, we talk ourselves out of it. It could be those that are feeling really excited in the moment, and you feel like dancing, and you feel like being really big and out there, and then you're like, no, that's shame. And you shrink back into yourself because you're worried about people laughing at you or pointing a finger at you. It could be that you see a job advertisement go up and you're like, I can apply for that. But then you start thinking about it, or you go and read the job description and you're like, I don't have those skill sets. Or you might just find one thing that you're not the best at, or you don't have the skills for, and you're like, no, I can't apply for that. Or in the time that we're in, you might have lost your job. You might have had to go on Centrelink for the first time. Or if in my case, for the first time in my life, I was off Centrelink in January. And it was one of the most exciting times for me. But then COVID hit, and I had to go, well, girl, you got kids to feed, and you got a mouth of your own to feed, and you got roof to keep over your head. So I had to sign up for Centrelink again. But because I had perspective and I'd done all of this self-work, I was able to hold it in a context and with a perspective that was more empowering, rather than punishing myself and beating myself up. And 5 seconds of courage with the big things, something for me, the 5 seconds of courage that I need at the moment is to be able to take the leap to write a book and put myself out there, and to put myself forward to do a TED talk. Those are the 2 things that I've been sitting back on. And if we marry that 5 seconds of courage with an action, we find that we do that more consistently, but starting little. Start with what's in front of you, starting your own backyard. What's something you've been wanting to do that you haven't been able to do? How can you take courage, or the next time you feel like doing something, how can you just let yourself follow that feeling rather than thinking about it? And hence why I've put courage, confidence, and purpose, because to me, courage comes first. Confidence is an outcome of knowing that you're capable of doing something, or you've had past evidence showing that you're capable of doing something, and you've been able to grow a growth mindset. You have an evidence base to show yourself that you can be resilient. So this is a photo of my daughter. My daughter also does jiu-jitsu. Now, for some people following in their mum's footsteps, when she already has 3 world titles, is a very accomplished person, but is also a very driven person, can be really easy. It can be, I just want to be like my mum. And for other people, it can be, I can imagine that it could be really intimidating having me as a mum or an auntie and going, well, I don't know if I can be like that. And this is one of my daughter's first competitions. She was a white belt. She'd been training for a couple of years and she'd been around wrestling and stuff. But because of her weight and the fact that she's bigger for her age group, she always gets put in with boys. And jiu-jitsu doesn't have as many females as it does males. So you'll often find, I've competed in competitions where I've competed in the men's division because there's been no women. And I said to her, I said, baby, just open your heart and just give it your best effort. I said, we'll worry about the rest afterwards. I said, just imagine yourself shaking hands and just go, and we'll see where you're at. And I was really grateful to have the opportunity to have this photo given to me. She tapped hands with this kid and she just went in. She just didn't hesitate. She just went all in. And every fight, she had 5 fights that day. And I just saw courage in action. I just saw leading from the heart. She didn't get into her head. She didn't worry about it. Every round she'd take a big deep breath and she'd literally tap hands and she'd dive in head first. Now, going head first in jiu-jitsu isn't always ideal, but to see her follow her heart, to me, was knowing that she had confidence in her own ability. And it's something that I've been able to create for her. Her dad and I have created that as a normality in our home, going after things that you want to do, but being okay with failing, and that your effort is more important than any outcome is normal in our household. Raising the expectation and raising the knowledge that you can learn and that you can always grow and improve is normal in our household. So it's been created in her. All children are confident when they're younger, but for some reason life starts to get to them. Someone's told them they can't do something. They've failed at something. And that confidence can be taken from you by life, by adults, by people that you love. But we can take back that power and recreate our confidence for ourselves. And it's more than a feeling. It's a belief in yourself that you can accomplish whatever you set your mind to. Now, if you don't have that confidence, that's where the courage step comes in. It's the courage to try. And once you've got the evidence base of what you're capable of and what you've not, you've then got your roadmap to go, I know where I'm at now. I know what I do well. I know what I don't do so well. And I can now identify what are the next steps I need to do to improve. And confidence comes from within. A lot of us are taught to seek external validation. A lot of us are taught that our self-worth is tied to our grades. It's taught to the trophies. It's the house you own. It's the money you own. But if we can let all of that go and come back to our basic humanity that we are, and create a sense of self-worth and self-connection, that regardless of what we do and what we own, we can have that confidence in ourselves. And if you don't feel that, then there's space there to ask yourself why. And it might mean that you need to do some work on yourself to be able to get to the point where you can believe in yourself and have confidence in yourself. And confidence isn't going to solve all of your problems. Everyone has bad days. Even I do. I still question myself when I go to international competitions going, have I done enough training? I'm going up against young women, some as young as 17, who train full time and who are fully supported, or they teach jiu-jitsu, so they're in that space all the time. And sometimes I question myself going, do I have what it takes to be here? But then I take a big deep breath and I go, well, let's find out. One, I've already got this evidence base and I know that I'm capable. But the first time I stepped onto the mats, I didn't have that confidence. I had to have the courage to try. But now that I know what I'm capable of, I can have the confidence to know that I can step onto any mat and at least have a try. And it's about trusting that no matter what happens, that you're able to handle and learn from the outcome. And that's where that growth mindset comes in. That's where that grit comes in. And if you want to learn how to create confidence within yourself, you can learn to change your emotional state. You can learn to change your physiological state. There's things called power poses, and that's where you stand up and you you put your hands on your hips and you start to do a power pose or a high energy move, and you can learn. And right now I'm in my trackies on the bottom and I'm dressed for the top because that was how I needed to feel comfortable and in the moment. But by being able to pull your shoulders back, hold your head up high, take a big deep breath, this allows us to create a physiological change that can then affect our mental state. Some things that can help you to build self-confidence is the right attitude or the right internal narrative that you can say to yourself. To me, Bunjil is everything. Bunjil is, he's our creator, he's our law keeper across a lot of First Nations tribes and communities. And for Barkindji, Yimpa mob being northwestern New South Wales, you see Bunjil everywhere. And they glide, they fly the highest heights. And for me, it's about opening up my eyes and connecting to my culture and learning, what can I learn from my culture? What can I learn from the way our mob did things pre-colonization? How did they learn to read the landscape? How did they learn to remember everything just through oral history? There was no such things as recordings or playback. Their textbooks was the landscape and each other. And I think when you can connect with yourself and you know what kind of emotional state you need to create, and athletes do this really well, and this isn't something that the everyday person naturally has access to. It's about visualization. It's about holding your body in a certain way. So before I go and compete, I let the nerves come, I feel it, but then I work with myself to channel it into something that can serve me. And that is, I spread sand on the ground from the river of my people, and I stand on that sand bare feet. I feel its grittiness under my feet. I feel that connection, and I know that there are 2,000 generations of history and connection that come before me. I then look at a photo of my mum and my sister, who are both passed away. They've passed into the dreaming. And I get to do things that they no longer can. I get to honor their memory by living a life to my fullest extent. I remember my children who are watching who I'm choosing to be and how I choose to show up. And I'm a mum in my 30s who chooses to go and chase world titles. I was talking to a young brother yesterday who said, I can't wait to get back to my normal. And he goes, what's your normal? I said, going to Tokyo for a weekend to compete, planning 6 months or 3 months in advance, and I'm going to go to Vegas and compete in a world championship. That's my normal. And that to me changes my state by pulling back my shoulders and taking up space and expanding. And I tense every muscle in my body, and I just close my eyes and I let out this roar, and I just feel everything. That's how I change my state getting ready to compete, because I've already done all the work. If it's with my kids and I need to switch from that business state to being with my kids, I allow myself to soften. I allow myself to take a deep breath so I can switch my mental state or my physiology to be in the state as a mum. It's the knowledge that I now have. I've worked really hard to obtain the knowledge that I have to be able to say these things. A lot of people would go, I could never do you. I didn't grow up where self-development was normal. I didn't grow up where having a budget was normal. I didn't grow up where going after your dreams and trying new things was normal. My family lived week to week. We were very much in survival mode for most of it. And if you had food on the table and a roof over your head, you had a lot to be grateful for. So I've had to work really hard to get the knowledge that I have, not just through book reading, but through lived experience. I live my life very much out loud. And I love to share the knowledge that I have with people. So that's why I'm always trying to grow. But it's not just about book knowledge or other people's knowledge. It's about how do I share with and unpack that knowledge with other people and have those deeper, bigger conversations and unpack the wisdom and experience. Not just going to get a degree and then thinking that I know what I need to know. It's about the application of that knowledge. It's not enough to make a conscious decision, to make a choice. You need to marry that with an action, because it's only when we choose to take those next steps that we can really begin to understand where we're at. What is our current level of experience? So if you're in business and your business has gone under, or you're not sure what the future of your business is, what experience do you have now? And what experience do you need to stay viable in your business? But also having the courage to look beyond that. What would be the dream situation for 2021? Now, we don't know what's going to happen, and it can be really hard for people to give themselves permission to dream at times like this. But if you look at people like Nelson Mandela, he spent 27 years in prison. What was it inside of him that allowed him to continue on in that and not come out of there filled with hate, but rather with a sense of purpose and drive to become the first Black president of South Africa? Now, if I've gotten any of my facts wrong, please forgive me. Happy to be corrected on any of those. But how did Muhammad Ali stick by his self-belief was so strong that he was the greatest in the world, that he has a legacy that transcends death. It transcends sport. He is quoted across literature, across sport, across education, across business. So what experience do you have now? What experience do you need to stay viable? But what's the big dream? What would be on the other side of that if everything was available to you? Now, some people might say, but I'm setting myself up for future hurt. But sometimes we can only create a different reality for ourselves. When we live in the world as it is, we meet reality for where we are, but we don't allow that to define where we can go next. And that's been my journey from courage to confidence. When I first started jiu-jitsu and I first started university, I didn't have anyone that had been to university. It wasn't like I had school telling me that university was an available option for me. I'd never been an elite athlete. I'd never met an elite athlete in my teens. So that was my starting point, was I just had to have the courage to try. Where I was, the reality that I was experiencing was not the reality that I wanted to stay in. So I looked inside my heart, and I didn't know this at the time, but I've always been led very much from my heart and my dreams, as opposed to the reality of where I've started. But now, as I'm getting older and realizing that I want to grow and expand, there needs to be a more strategic approach to this, where I have a dream inside my heart and I know where I want to go, but meeting myself where I am can be a very effective way of minimizing the impacts of wasted effort. And it'll allow me to be very deliberate with the choices that I make, particularly now that I'm very time poor in terms of I have my kids, I have my culture, I have my own dreams with jiu-jitsu, and I'm in business, and I'm trying to understand how to fit all of that together to meet my ancestral calling and mandate of being able to help bring up women and girls, bring up our culture and help young people and share the knowledge that I have. The first time that I decided that I wanted to try and be a world champion, I didn't know if it was possible for someone like me, but I knew I had the courage to try. And when I won my first world title, that became my evidence base. That became my knowledge and experience to lead to the confidence to go, if I can do this, then I can try other things. But now I know, now sitting with myself and unpacking my story, winning a world title is easy in comparison to burying my mum, knowing that I will never have the chance to say goodbye or unpack what happened with her. Winning a world title is easy in comparison to having fair skin and to having people tell you, who are you to call yourself Black? Even in my own community, I still have people question me, going, you're not from here, you're not Barkindji, like, who do you think you are? And then to have white people say, but how can you be Aboriginal? or you're too loud, you're too outspoken. Winning a world title is easy compared to carrying those things and that day-to-day hurt of having the courage to show up and express yourself to the world and share your dreams. It still hurts when people tell you that you're too loud, you're too noisy, you're too arrogant. But there's a difference between arrogance and confidence. I have to believe in myself before anyone else can. And there are still days when my heart races, my palms sweat just thinking about the new challenges that face me. But I've learned that success would not make me confident. Confidence in myself and my abilities is what will make me successful. That's why coming from the inside out is far more important. And confidence is the cornerstone of leadership. If you don't believe in yourself, how can others believe in you? And how can you lead others from a place of integrity and power and connection and really bring people forward if you don't hold that within yourself? So some of the tips and the tools to build courage is your body language. Again, your physiology, which just as a fancy word for the emotion and the energy and the way you hold yourself, can change your mental state, and your mental state can change your physiology. If you're really struggling with yourself and you're feeling burdened and shame and embarrassment, like we tend to curl up inside of ourselves, or we take up space with rage, but being able to sit still within your confidence and being able to hold space, we can choose to change things. Thinking positive can manifest in several ways by changing your focus, because where your focus goes, your energy goes. Having a growth mindset, getting things done, choosing to do the right thing, choosing to live by a value system and make decisions based on that value system. And these things can define your character. Exercise. Exercise is a massive thing that can change your mental state, and it can lead to you feeling more confident because you're able to breathe. You've created space between your energy and your mental state. And learning to manage your fears. Failing isn't your enemy. It's fearing failure that can truly cripple us. It's about having big goals and knowing that you're going to feel overwhelmed. You're eventually going to fall or feel like you can't do it. But when you have the courage to take a big deep breath and look back within inside yourself and go, okay, what's the next step? And then following through with that next step. And you do that consistently and you create a new narrative for yourself. Standing in your truth and power. When you've done the self-work and you know who you are at the core, it allows you to be able to stand true in that, and you can make new decisions. And we can all tell ourselves stories. We all tell ourselves stories about why we can't do something, or why we can't get healthy, or I can't afford to eat right, or why we can't create a budget, or why I can never buy a house or do a degree. We always hear people who can tell themselves stories about why they can't do something. Now, if we can tell ourselves stories about why we can't do something, why can't we make the story that we tell ourselves more empowering about who you want to be? And rather than about what you fear and beating yourself up and all the things that could go wrong, imagine if you focused all of your energy on what you're trying to create rather than what you don't want or the old way of doing things. Now imagine that story. Imagine how much more empowering that would be if you focused on what you were trying to create rather than what you were trying to change or avoid. Now, purpose. Purpose to me is about, what do I do in this lifetime that is going to inherit? It's tied to my legacy. And it's the dictionary version of it is the reason for which something is done or created, or for which something exists. Purpose creates meaning. It offers a sense of direction and helps guide our path, our behavior, and our goals when applied to our lives. Now, you can have different purposes. I have a different purpose for being in business right now to the bigger purpose that I have. So I have seasonal purpose, and then I have my big guiding purpose. I have my personal purpose of what I want to be in the world, and they're all interconnected to being the change I want to see in the world and growing. I want to see how far I can grow and how far I can spread my wings. And by having a life purpose, and your life purpose may not necessarily be the thing that you get paid for. You hear a lot about passion and purpose and doing what you love, but you might not necessarily get paid for those things. But if you love your kids and you love your family, and by holding a job down, and you might hate your job, but what does that job allow you to do? What does having a steady income allow you to do? It allows you to keep a roof over your head. It allows you to keep your children safe and provide food for them and provide sustainability. So understanding why we're doing things is really important. And it's about recognizing your gifts and using them to contribute value to the world. Because through chaos and uncertainty, this is when we create new possibilities and opportunities, and our purpose can evolve. And what about if you ask yourself, what if? What if it was possible? What could be on the other side of that? And if you're overwhelmed with decision making, or you're like me and you've got a lot of things going on all at the same time, a dear mentor of mine said, Chantel, before you make any decision or you take any action, ask yourself for what purpose, so that when I'm doing things, I'm deliberately choosing to do things that are aligned to moving me forward, or allowing me to grow, or keeping me connected to my purpose, as opposed to letting myself get distracted. And the most basic definition of the purpose is to ask yourself why, the why question. Now, for anyone that's really interested in this space, the best model and the best thing I've come across is Ikigai, which is the Japanese concept for meaning your reason for being. And it's the reason. Ikigai is a Japanese word for purpose. And the reason they found this was because in Japan, they have the highest population of people who live to be over 100 and healthily over 100 and still active. And they found this model, and it was what you love, your mission, and that combination of what you're good at, what can you be paid for. So I think this is a really good model to look at. One of the books that I've got is literally this big, and it's about this thick, and it's such a beautiful read. And I think sitting and asking yourself and unpacking all these questions, it can get us closer to what is our meaning for life, our reason for being. And just looking at the things that we discussed over session 1 and 2, that is a part of my Ikigai. It's a part of my reason. And I'm still unpacking how to say that in 1 sentence or 2 sentences. But right now, my purpose is to unpack my purpose for being in the world. And sitting in that space and creating that space of opportunity and space to be able to think and sit still for a while is really important, to be able to create opportunities to connect with these things. In the first session, we discussed about the warrior within, and the second one, we discussed grit and grace, and what are the things that you can take away from those things in order to be able to help you move forward during this time of COVID and our Black Lives Matters and the economy going down and just all the stresses that come with this time, but also what are the opportunities and what do you need to do personally to be able to come out the other side. So for me, what's next? Yesterday, I took the time to sit and balance my yin and yang, and I sat with one of my young nieces and I taught culture. I taught weaving, something that I only myself learned a couple of months ago, but I've deeply connected with, and that balances out my energy that I do when I'm fighting and when I'm speaking. And to see this young one's face and to ask her, what did she take from that? She goes, Auntie, I just feel really happy and I just feel really connected and loved. That for me is what's next, is how do I give more of that to young people to shift their potential for what's possible? How do I give more of that to people who are struggling? How do I give more of that to people who are questioning, well, what's next? How is it possible? And that's kind of why I've become the Barkindji warrior and why I'm creating this story that extends beyond the Barkindji warrior, and starting to try and take things to the next level. Like, what does that look like? Having a website, having a professional email, sharing my story through my social media content. But if there's one thing that I can leave you with from all 3 of these, is to ask yourself, who is it that you want to be? What is possible for you in this time? And what would you want for yourself on the other side of this? Because just by having the courage to ask those questions and creating a space, you're creating a new way of thinking. You're creating deeper than your mind. And you never know what can come through the other side. I'd really love to know anyone that's got any questions, and use this last 10 minutes 15 minutes, we've got till 12 to really unpack some of these things that we've discussed, particularly if you've come along to previous sessions, and just say thank you for gifting me your time today. Hey, James.
Hi, Chantel. Just want to thank you for today's webinar, and on behalf of the Kinaway team and the members as well, we'd like to thank you for presenting some really helpful and insightful webinars over the past few weeks. I think it's been really relevant now, and it's really important for us not to look after just the health of our businesses, but also our mental and our physical health and well-being also. So once again, just want to thank you on behalf of the Kinaway team, and it's really, really appreciated you presenting the last few weeks.
No, thank you so much. And like I said, it's so important for me to be able to share, but what I want people to take away from this is that this is all new for me as well. Like, I'm also seeking opportunities and trying to use the knowledge I have to the best of my ability, and not every day is the best, but just being able to connect with people as well is probably one of the biggest things that I've taken from this and the strength that I've gotten. But I'd really love to know if there's any questions or anything like that from Mob as well. Come on, you Mob, there's got to be at least one question on there.
Yeah, I've seen a few comments just popping up. Everyone thanking you as well.
Questions.
So.
Come on.
I'm sure if there are any questions after this, I'm sure they know where to get in touch. Where they can find you. They can also reach out to us here at Kinaway, and we can put you in touch that way as well. Yeah. So again, just want to thank you, and for all you Mob out there who tuned in, don't forget to tune in next week, same time, same place, on Facebook and YouTube. We've got a question come in from Kinaway actually. Did you see that one?
How do you handle lateral violence?
Yeah, this can be the last one.
That's a really big one, because it's something that I've been really trying to unpack, and I've actually had a few young ones reach out to me and go, how do we deal with this, when, especially if you're fair skinned, blonde hair, blue eyed, or you're trying to strive and do something. You see it all the time. And I was only having this conversation this morning with someone that I work with. How I deal with it personally is that, now knowing what I know about trauma and what I know about our history, I try not to take that personally. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't hurt, but I'm trying to gain a wider perspective. And by knowing what my purpose is and knowing my why, I'm better able to, and it depends. If the lateral violence is, I just hear about it, versus actually someone coming to me and saying it. Now, they're two very different things. Hearing about it, my response to the people coming to me, telling me is, you know what? I wish that person all good for their life. And if I've done something culturally wrong, come and speak to me. I'm happy to unpack that. But I try not to, that's not where I put my energy. I'm putting my energy into the work that I'm doing and who I'm being, because I now understand that by me speaking about these things and choosing to be the creator of my own destiny and following that calling that I feel, it allows me to sit with those things and let them go, because it's not my focus. It's not my purpose to sit there in that space. My purpose is to make sure I'm practicing culture, that I'm passing it on to my nieces and nephews and my family as best as I can, but also that I'm being my best self, so that when I'm up on a stage in a room full of non-Aboriginal people, I'm showing them what we're capable of, and I'm really creating a different story. If the lateral violence is directed at me in person and I'm there in the space, then I call it, as I said, I'm like, sis or brother, like, where's this coming from? Like, what's the real issue? What's going on for you in order for you to do that? And it might not be at that time, but a really good friend of mine spoke with me, and she said that sometimes she'll pick up the phone and she'll call people and she'll be like, oi, what's that about? And I think that being able to have the courage to do that is going to start challenging people to go, this isn't okay. This is not the way we do culture. But also, in order to be able to stop doing something, we need to call it out. Now, if it's people that are educated, I have a very different approach, because there's a certain level of responsibility that we need to band together. If it's someone that's operating in survival mode or very much from a trauma space, then I approach that with a much more open heart. But if you're educated and you know what you're doing, I call you to account then and there, because that's my space. Because if I do that, you might be less likely to do it to someone else.
Sure. That's a great answer.
Thank you.
Any more questions coming through?
No, look, thank you so much, James. I think
Sure.
there's still there's so much to learn. And I think for our mob, just even listening into these things, but take note of how much is happening, how much people are putting stuff out there to try and help. There's Karen Demery is a woman who is a good friend of mine. She's Canberra-based, and she's created the Staunch Sisterhood podcast. And she's out there every day doing lives, and she's sharing trauma-informed self-development content. And to me, that's what Kinaway is trying to do. They're trying to figure out how can they best serve their people. So if we all come together and we're all trying to do our best and share our knowledge, but also take that responsibility to show up. Because by taking on these advantages and jumping onto these webinars or going to watch them afterwards, like if you can't log on today, we've kind of got no reasons left to not be doing the work to get to where we want to get to. Because there's people who, I saw there's an Aboriginal fella in Sydney who learned to do barbering from YouTube. And he's now running programs in schools. So we kind of have no excuses left as to why we can't get to where we want to get to if we're willing to do the work.
Yeah, that's right. And that's I guess it's something that I've kind of been saying to our businesses too when we've been reaching out is, now's a good time to work on your business. When obviously sales and things have gone down a bit, and like you said, there are plenty of resources out there. There's plenty of content out there as well. And, with what we're doing here, it's just really important to have a sense of community, particularly with our mob. We do have some really great ideas, and, we have a really diverse sort of membership as well. And it always helps to kind of collaborate. It doesn't matter what sort of industry you're in. I'm sure there's always opportunities to learn from each other. So it can be a hard place to understand where to start. But I think just having the courage to go, okay, this is this, or getting a mentor, reaching out to Kinaway, or like you've got Yolanda Burnett, she's a First Nations woman who is a life coach, investing in yourself, or sitting with a good friend and going and just doing a brain dump and going, I don't know where to start, and just doing a brain dump and going, sometimes the easiest place to start is, where don't I want to be? What don't I want in my life? Because at least if you create the picture of going, I don't want to be that person, I don't want to be there, and you don't have to do it alone. You're very much right, James. It's about the community. Like, I'm learning all this stuff, and the stuff that I've spoken about today is the stuff that I'm working through. Like, I'm doing Murray Business School, I'm doing the Business and Heals program that Kinaway supported. Like, I'm putting in a lot of hours to work on myself and on my business to understand what are the opportunities. But when we get back to full operations, I'm prepared, and I've done that back end work to do that. And some days are easier than others. But that's why I said, if you just get up and you just try that one little bit more, each day kind of builds on itself. Yeah, that's right. And I think, one thing my old fellow always taught me, that knowledge is power, and, you might be attending some sort of workshops, or reading something, you might be thinking, it might be relevant now or useful at the present time, but, moving forward, you might draw on that, or draw on some sort of learnings that you got previously to whatever it is you're doing. So, again, Chantal, I just want to really thank you.
Can I add one thing there, James? Knowledge is power, but only when it's applied. Because a lot of people got a lot of knowledge, and they're choosing not to put it in action. Like, when my jiu-jitsu coach teaches me a jiu-jitsu move, and I'm like, oh, that'd really help my game, but it's going to be no good to me if I don't take it home and I don't choose to put it into practice. And then when I'm competing, I choose to take a calculated risk and go, hey, I'm actually going to try that new move. It's the same as if you're trying out a new service or something. It's like, I've got to take a risk to see if it's going to work, but calculated risks. But knowledge is no good to us if we're not applying it and actually using it in our actions.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think it kind of relates well to today's webinar about the practical kind of components as well. So, yeah, again, Chantel, I just want to thank you on behalf of the Kinaway team and all the members for coming in and presenting today. For you more about there, don't forget to tune in next week, same time, same place, the same platforms on Facebook and YouTube. The next 3 webinars will be a bit more business specific, with Empowered Digital presenting about the multiple aspects of commerce. It's particularly relevant as many businesses are having to adapt and find additional ways to make their products and services readily available to consumers out there. It's going to be broken down into 3 webinars. Webinar 1 is going to be on the aspects of how to start an e-commerce business. Webinar 2, just an intro to Shopify and its importance for businesses wanting to open an online store. And webinar 3, we'll just be checking on the pulse of your e-commerce presence and assessing your business's online performance as well. So once again, thanks everybody for tuning in. Thank you to Chantel for the past few weeks, and don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, turn on the notifications, and most importantly, have a good weekend.
Have a deadly weekend, you mob, and thanks to Kinaway. And yeah, anyone needs a yarn, just reach out.